Joining us now is President Trump's personal attorney, the former New York City Mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Mayor Giuliani, great to see you. We hated to preempt you there, but I figured you wouldn't mind considering Bernie, your former police commissioner, being pardoned today. Firstly, wanted to get your reaction to the news today.
Well, first of all, he's not just my former police commissioner. He's one of my best friends. And he's a man that I survived September 11 with. He almost died. I almost did. We were together with other people, and I would say that the man is a rock. And not only that, he's a very brave man, one of the most decorated police officers, decorated in the military, volunteered to serve in Iraq. I used to call him up in Iraq and see how things were going. I could hear machine guns in the background. He made a mistake. He paid for it, paid a lot for it, probably paid a lot more than he should have because of political reasons. But he did, and it's a long time ago now. He's led an exemplary life since then. He's helped people. He's learned a lot, and he's turned it around to helping other people like Eddie Gallagher. And he has a lot to give. This man is an extraordinarily talented investigator. He's an enormously talented writer. He's written several books. I'm glad the president did this. You know, there could have been another president might have thought, well, you know, he's such a good friend of mine. It might be looked at differently. Or the man on the merits deserves a pardon. I used to recommend pardons to President Ronald Reagan, and I know pardons backwards and forwards. 5 years out, he's 5 years out. Nothing wrong in those 5 years, no prior conviction before this. Exemplary service to the United States government, the city of New York, the state of New Jersey, a decorated police officer, saved people's lives. This is a well-deserved pardon, as is the pardon for Michael Milken, which I can say because I prosecuted Michael Milken.
I was going to ask you about that.
Many years ago.
Yeah.
I believe Michael Milken, who I have gotten to know over the last 20 years, mostly in dealing with raising money for prostate cancer, because we both suffered from it. That brought us together. We talked out our differences. It's a strange situation, but I consider him a friend and also consider him someone who turned his life around. I think he's actually waited way too long for a pardon. I thought it would have happened many, many years ago. So I'm glad to see that President Trump did that. And the same thing for Blagojevich. That sentence of 17 years is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, you know, forgiveness is a powerful thing.
I don't know if you realized it. I don't know if you realize it, but President Ronald Reagan granted a lot of pardons. He believed in redemption. He believed that he believed people can turn their lives around. He saw people who did turn their lives around and felt that pardons encouraged that. Well,
like Pope John Paul II, he forgave the man who shot him, which, you know, like I was saying, forgiveness is an incredibly powerful thing to do, and it allows, you know, a situation like this, everybody to move past something that happened, those mistakes you mentioned in the past. And, you know, I really do appreciate, Mayor, you sharing your personal thoughts on Bernie with us. You know, we know him, of course, we respect him, we love Bernie, but, you know, you can't say enough about him.
But great man. He's a great man.
Yeah.
Exceptional. And so was the president.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the president now. Today, President Trump, in addition to pardoning and commuting those sentences there, he threatened to sue for damages he said he suffered as a result of the Mueller probe. Quoting a tweet here, "Everything having to do with this fraudulent investigation is a hoax. If I wasn't president, I'd be suing everyone all over the place. Maybe I still will." Have you talked to the president about any potential legal action?
Well, of course, I can't discuss my conversations with him as an attorney, but you can assume that I and his other attorneys have talked about every option with him. That is an option. No secret that it is an option. It's an option that last couple of months I've embraced even more and more with the tremendous violations of his civil rights. I mean, he was treated, I mean, much worse than a terrorist or an organized criminal. I mean, they took away his right to counsel. They took away his right to cross-examine witnesses. He can't even know the identity of the person accusing him of false things, like this whistleblower, who I'm now convinced is a complete fraud, and may very well have been involved in the initiation of this frame-up of the president way back in 2016. I mean, I think it is incumbent on the FBI to find out who the whistleblower is, because it is very, very possible that between 2016 and now, he has been continuously attempting, first illegally, to prevent the president from becoming President of the United States, and then illegally trying to remove him from office, which means by false means.
Well, the president indicated...
Not a wild hypothesis, and if somebody would bother to ask me, I probably would give them some evidence that would support that.
Well, President Trump indicated he may know who the author, this anonymous author, is today, also maybe who the whistleblower is. I mean, you know, a lot of this stuff is out there. If you really kind of scratch just below the surface, it's there. Now, let's keep talking a little bit about the Department of Justice and what's going on there. Roger Stone's sentencing is still on for Thursday. The judge there, Amy Berman Jackson, refused a delay, saying it wouldn't be a prudent thing to do. But a lot of people think that Roger Stone was prosecuted as a result of this investigation because of the dossier. That document has been largely discredited now. We know it was paid for by the Democrats. And even after all these congressional investigations, there's really no underlying crime that was included in the articles of impeachment. You know, these process crimes are really what are tripping up people like Roger Stone and Michael Flynn. Now, obviously, people, including the president, the attorney general, think this potential sentence of 7 to 90 years is extremely harsh and cruel for a man that is 70 years old. What do you think the president should do? And would you support President Trump commuting or pardoning Roger Stone?
Well, I can't discuss with you the pardons or commutations in that particular case because it is attorney-client privilege. I can tell you that I think the case against Roger Stone is an outrage. I think it's a case that was done for one simple reason, to try to get him to turn on the president. Just like, I mean, yes, they convicted Manafort, and yes, Manafort probably did some things wrong, but, you know, they actually framed him with a false black ledger that is now proven beyond reasonable doubt to have been falsified by Ukrainians and members of the Democratic National Committee. And General Flynn, they basically tricked him. They asked him a question they knew the answer to, and they had the document in their pocket. I mean, if I did that as an assistant U.S. attorney, my boss would have fired me. Even Mueller said he thought he could get away with it because they were a new administration. But what is it you're going to do with a new administration you won't do with an old one? I said Comey, rather.
Yeah,
so
that should make no difference whatsoever.
These cases, well, I'd like to make a point. Hillary Clinton was investigated for something far more serious than the garbage they investigated Trump for, which turned out to be nothing. None of her people were indicted. They were all given immunity. Nobody was indicted. They didn't try to flip anybody. They didn't put anybody before, a grand. They didn't put them in jail and put them in solitary confinement like Manafort. You don't think you could have made some crimes like on the guy who hammered the 13 cell phones? How about bleach bidding a server? I mean, only organized criminals and money launderers do that.
Yeah.
I mean, she was so guilty, it was obviously a fix. And the fix was they didn't conduct a real investigation. I mean, the hypocrisy.
Why do you think
what they do to Republicans and Democrats is horrendous, and it's got to stop.
Especially after the failure of the DOJ last week to prosecute Andrew McCabe. A lot of people still think this deep state mentality exists within the Department of Justice under the Attorney General, under William Barr now.
Well, of course it exists. Who do you think those 4 guys were that recommended 9 years? I mean, they were Inspector Javert, Inspector Javert, Inspector Javert, and Inspector Javert. They all worked for Mueller. I'm sure they were all Democrats. I'm sure they were all Trump haters. They were trying to frame Trump, and Mueller's office was a disgrace. It was a disgrace of prosecutorial indiscretion, unethics, and illegal behavior, particularly by Weissman. And the guy you have on the screen didn't know what the hell was going on. I mean, you saw him testify. I know him for 30 years.
You think Robert Mueller lost control of this whole situation a long time ago?
I met him the first time 2 weeks into representing President Trump, and I asked him, you know, Bob, we got to get it straight that you have no power to indict. And he said, I take it under advisement. I said, no, it's not under advisement. It's a rule of the Justice Department. He didn't know that. His staff had to tell him that. And I talked to John Dowd also. John had similar experiences with him where there were things that, you know, any normal lawyer would know he didn't know. So I just thought he was a little tired.
Well,
then they put him away. I never saw him again for a year and a half. I called him the Wizard of Oz. You'd call up and you'd say...
Well, you know, there were a lot of people surprised by kind of the lack of veracity in his testimony when we finally did get to hear from him. Mayor, I want to move on a little and talk a little bit about another mayor of New York City, and that's Mike Bloomberg. He's surging in the polls now. He's qualified for the next Democratic debate. But as you know, he spent more than $300 million on ads directly attacking President Trump. Meanwhile, he's running away from many of the policies that he adapted from your administration that were successful to keeping New York safe, like stop stop and frisk. Democrats don't seem to mind, though, that Bloomberg has completely changed course on this tactic. So if Mayor Bloomberg were to match up against President Trump in the general election, what do you think is his biggest weakness?
They compared the two records. Mayor Bloomberg was an average mayor, and President Trump is a transitional president. Right now, his first three and a half year match up with almost any president in history. He's literally given us the best economy we've ever had. For African American and Hispanics and women, highest wages they've ever had. He's got an economy that's at rates as good or better than Kennedy and Reagan. He's got a world in which he's made it more peaceful. He pays attention. He doesn't go to sleep during things like Benghazi. He pays attention to corruption, like corruption in the Ukraine, which Obama paid no attention to. You're going to find out more about that. I mean, he's so much better.
We've seen the poll numbers, Mike. The Gallup numbers, where so many people feel like they're better off now than they were 3 years ago. But it went, Bloomberg, with his record, these comments we've heard him make about minorities and about women, a lot of this stuff is not getting the same type of coverage in the press that the type of, these accusations that were made against Donald Trump, that he's a sexist and he's a racist. You don't hear those same type of reports coming out about Michael Bloomberg, even though the comments, are look bad.
You know why? Because the press is virtually corrupt. They're corrupt. They're corrupted by the Democratic Party and their hatred of Donald Trump. That's why they don't cover Biden's criminality, which is astounding. He committed major crimes for millions of dollars. In the case of Michael, the biggest problem I have with Michael is his saying that he inherited the program from me. Well, the program that he inherited is very different than the program that got declared unconstitutional. The program that I gave him was held constitutional by Eric Holder and Janet Reno because we were much more careful. We limited the searches to 100,000. He brought them all the way up to 600,000 with a 5% success rate, which means 95% of the people didn't have anything on them. We had a much higher success rate. And we documented it because as a lawyer, I understood Terry versus the United States. And when you listen to Michael explain it, he really has no understanding of Terry against the United States. He thinks it's a tactic. He thinks it's a tactic just to get guns and to frighten people not to have guns. It's not. It's stop, question, and frisk. The Supreme Court creates a little leeway for police to be able to stop someone where they don't have probable cause to arrest them, but have suspicion that they may be committing a crime. And then they can ask a question. If the question makes them nervous, makes them professionally concerned, they can conduct a search. Now, if you're going to do that, you've got to train the police very well. You've got to use experienced police. You try to do it 600 times. You try to extend it by 6 times with young police officers. Well, you're going to blow the whole program. So I resent the fact that he talks about inheriting from me. I'd like to make it clear that it's a lie and one is backstabbing. That meeting that he described, or was described, I don't know if it's in the book or not, but it was in the leak to the Times, which is the things that these guys lie about so they can sell the book because they make it exaggerated. The reality is that that meeting that he talked about where the president said, no meeting, if he doesn't get a meeting unless he investigates Biden, never took place. There was no such meeting alone, together, or with all the people that he claims were in that meeting. I think he says Secretary of State was in that meeting, the Chief of Staff was in that meeting, I was in that meeting, someone else and the president. Well, I'm sorry, John. Either you have a bad memory or you're lying in order to sell your book. Second, if you had concerns about how I was dealing with Ukraine, you've known me for 10 years, John. Why didn't you come up to me like a man and tell me instead of going around my back?
To talk to you, especially after the good news we got today about Bernie Kerik, our friend.
I'm very happy today.
We're great to talk to.
And Michael Milken, too.
And it's a good day for all those folks. You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing news channel, now in 65 million homes. Get Newsmax TV on all the major cable systems or go to newsmaxtv.com and click on the Find Newsmax tab to locate us. Remember, Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.